August 23, 1942. The seemingly invincible German Sixth Army, under the leadership of General Friedrich Paulus, reached the gates of a city situated on the western bank of the Volga River. The name of the city was Stalingrad. To clear their path of advancement, the German Air Force, or the Luftwaffe, launched a catastrophic bombardment on the city that day. Nearly 1,600 warplanes flew over 4,000 sorties throughout the day, dropping more than 1,000 tons of bombs, turning the industrial city into a burning hell. From the high banks of the city, German soldiers watched the devastating scene, a vast sea of fire and smoke that seemed to swallow the sky. Hitler and his generals were certain that Soviet resistance had crumbled and the city would fall within weeks. The undefeated German army was on the brink of final victory, but they did not know that this city, named after Stalin, was destined to become their graveyard and the stage that would decide the fate of World War II. How did a planned victory turn into one of the bloodiest and most decisive battles in history? How did Stalingrad become the tomb of the German army's dreams? Today, we will learn the complete epic of that legendary struggle. To understand the context of this story, we must go back a year to June 22, 1941. On this day, Hitler ordered the invasion of the Soviet Union under the codename Operation Barbarossa. In the initial stages, Soviet resistance nearly collapsed in the face of the German blitzkrieg, or lightning-fast attacks. Millions of Soviet soldiers surrendered, and the Germans reached the outskirts of Moscow. However, the fall of Moscow was prevented by the legendary General Winter, the brutal Russian cold, and desperate Soviet resistance. In the summer of 1942, Hitler made a major shift in his strategy. After the failure to capture Moscow, he ordered the main strength of his army to be directed toward the south. This new and ambitious campaign was named Case Blue, Fall Blau. Case Blue had two primary objectives, both essential for sustaining the German war machine. First, the seizure of the Caucasus oil fields. The main and most important goal was to capture the vast oil fields of Baku and Grozny in the Caucasus. Nearly 90% of the Soviet Union's oil was produced there. Capturing them would not only paralyze the Soviet war machine, but also fulfill Germany's growing demand for oil, turning their dream of world conquest into reality. The second objective was to capture the vital industrial city of Stalingrad on the banks of the Volga. This was necessary to protect the left flank of the German army advancing toward the Caucasus. Furthermore, the Volga River was Russia's main waterway, used for communication between the north and south, and for transporting supplies from the Caspian Sea to Moscow. If Stalingrad fell, this lifeline would be completely severed. Beyond this, the fall of the city named after Stalin would be a massive psychological victory for Hitler and a supreme personal insult to Stalin. Hitler divided his Army Group South into two parts. Army Group A advanced toward the Caucasus, and Army Group B moved toward Stalingrad. Although his generals warned him about the risks of dividing the forces, Hitler's confidence was at its peak. He believed the Soviet Red Army was near destruction and that the campaign would be an easy victory. But this overconfidence and the tendency to underestimate the enemy would prove fatal. By the time the German Sixth Army reached the outskirts of Stalingrad, nearly 80% of the city had been turned to rubble by Luftwaffe bombings. Paradoxically, this destruction created a massive advantage for the Soviets. The broken buildings, ruined factories, tunnels, and labyrinths of debris created an impenetrable obstacle for German tanks and mechanized forces. Stalingrad, stretching as a long, narrow city along the western bank of the Volga, became the ideal field for close-quarter infantry combat. Thus began one of history's most brutal examples of urban warfare, which the German soldiers themselves called Rattenkrieg, or Rat War. This was because the fighting happened not just on the streets, but in sewers, drainage tunnels, and the basements of buildings. A bloody struggle ensued for every house, every floor, and even every room. In this grueling battle, the average life expectancy of a soldier dropped to just 24 hours. Two extraordinary commanders led their respective sides in this war. On one side was the prudent and calculating commander of the German Sixth Army, General Friedrich Paulus. On the other was the iron-willed and uncompromising commander of the Soviet 62nd Army, General Vasily Chuikov. Stalin's order to Chuikov was clear: there is no land for us beyond the Volga. Chuikov realized that it was impossible to compete with the Germans in conventional open-field warfare. Therefore, he adopted a new tactic called hugging the enemy. This meant keeping Soviet soldiers so close to German positions, sometimes separated by only a single wall, that the German Air Force or artillery could not bomb them for fear of hitting their own troops. As a result, the struggle turned into a savage face-to-face, hand-to-hand combat. The Soviets formed small storm groups of 6 to 8 people who, armed with submachine guns, grenades, and anti-tank rifles, launched ambush attacks from within the ruins. Every location in Stalingrad became a legendary battlefield. For instance, Pavlov's house. Under the leadership of Sergeant Yakov Pavlov, only 25 Soviet soldiers held a 4-story apartment building for nearly 2 months, completely halting the German advance. They turned the building into a fortress and repelled numerous German attacks. Then there was the grain silo, a massive concrete structure for which both sides lost countless men. Inside, machine gun and grenade battles raged for days. The air grew heavy with the smell of dust, gunpowder, and blood. Additionally, the Red October steel factory and the Barakati gun factory were at the heart of the war. During the day, the Germans would capture parts of the factories, and under the cover of night, the Soviets would reclaim them through tunnels. There was no fixed front line. Soviet soldiers might occupy the top floor of a building, while Germans held the ground floor. Stalingrad became a meat grinder that consumed the best soldiers of both sides. Amidst this vast and impersonal destruction, some stories of individual heroism turned the Battle of Stalingrad into legend. The most famous among these was the Duel of the Snipers. A single sniper hidden in the rubble was enough to break the morale of an entire platoon. One of the Soviet Union's greatest snipers was Vasily Zaitsev. A simple shepherd from the Ural Mountains, Zaitsev became a legend due to his extraordinary vision and patience. He alone killed over 200 German soldiers. According to legend, Germany sent Major Erwin Koenig, the head of their best sniper school, to deal with Zaitsev. For several days, a nerve-wracking game of hide-and-seek played out between the two master snipers amidst the city's ruins, ending finally with Koenig's death. This sniper duel was a miniature version of the entire Battle of Stalingrad, a struggle of patience, strategy, and ruthlessness. Furthermore, the role of Soviet women warriors in the Battle of Stalingrad was immense. The Soviet Union was the only country in World War II that allowed women to fight directly on the front lines. Thousands of women fought. They were skilled snipers, machine gunners, and anti-aircraft gunners. There was even a group of female pilots known as the Night Witches, who flew old, silent biplanes at night to drop bombs on the Germans, depriving them of sleep. Their heroic struggle alongside the men was one of the strengths of the Stalingrad resistance. While this life-and-death struggle raged inside the city, the Soviet High Command in Moscow was planning a massive and daring counterattack. It was led by the two greatest strategists of the Soviet Union, General Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Vasilevsky. They noticed that the Germans had deployed all their best soldiers in the battle for Stalingrad city, but their flanks to the north and south of the city were extremely weak. These flanks were guarded by the armies of Germany's allies, Romania, Hungary, and Italy, who lacked proper weaponry, especially anti-tank guns, and had low morale. Exploiting this weakness, Zhukov devised his master plan, codenamed Operation Uranus. The plan was a classic pincer movement. The Soviet forces would bypass Stalingrad city and attack the weak Romanian flanks from the north and south. For this attack, the Soviets secretly gathered nearly 1 million soldiers, 1,350 tanks, and over 13,000 artillery pieces. An incredible logistical feat. On November 19, 1942, this massive Soviet counterattack began. In the biting cold and thick fog, Soviet T-34 tanks swept through the unprepared Romanian defenses like paper. In just 4 days, on November 23rd, the northern and southern arms of the Soviet pincer met at a bridge over the Don River near a town called Kalach. In one of the most successful military operations in history, nearly 300,000 Axis troops, including General Paulus's 6th Army, were completely cut off from the outside world. They were trapped in a massive pocket, which the Germans called the Kessel, or cauldron. Hell then descended upon the German soldiers inside the Stalingrad cauldron. General Paulus appealed to Hitler for permission to break out of the trap, but Hitler remained adamant. He ordered the 6th Army to stay in Stalingrad and fight to the last man. He believed that by using Stalingrad as a fortress, they could hold down the Soviets. He promised that the army would be kept alive through a massive airlift led by Luftwaffe Chief Hermann Göring. Göring boastfully promised to deliver at least 500 tons of supplies daily, the minimum required for the 6th Army to survive. But this was a hollow promise. Due to intense Soviet anti-aircraft fire and the terrifying Russian winter, the Luftwaffe could not even provide an average of 100 tons of supplies a day. The condition of the German soldiers inside the trap deteriorated rapidly. As food ran out, they began to eat their thousands of horses. Meanwhile, ammunition was also nearing its end. In the absence of winter clothing, thousands of soldiers died of frostbite in temperatures of 30-degree Celsius. Diseases like lice-borne typhus and dysentery reached epidemic proportions. The cauldron became a massive death trap. In December, the Germans launched a rescue mission called Operation Winter Storm under Field Marshal von Manstein. His panzer divisions reached within 30 miles of the cauldron. The starving soldiers inside could hear the sound of their cannons in the distance. But Paulus, still loyal to Hitler's orders, made no attempt to break out and meet Manstein. Consequently, the rescue mission failed. The fate of the 6th Army became clear. In January 1943, the Soviets launched Operation Ring, the final blow against the Germans inside the cauldron. General Paulus repeatedly asked Hitler for permission to surrender, but Hitler rejected it every time. On January 30th, he even promoted Paulus to the rank of Field Marshal, a cruel gesture, as no German field marshal in history had ever surrendered. Hitler wanted Paulus to commit suicide rather than surrender. However, Paulus decided to go against Hitler's wishes to save the lives of his remaining soldiers. On January 31st, 1943, from the basement of a departmental store in Stalingrad, a starved, devastated, and defeated Field Marshal, Friedrich Paulus, surrendered to Soviet forces. By February 2nd, the last traces of German resistance were wiped out. The consequences of the Battle of Stalingrad were horrific. Between the two sides, nearly 2 million soldiers and civilians were killed, wounded, or missing, making it the single bloodiest battle in history. The approximately 91,000 German soldiers who surrendered were taken to prisoner of war camps in Siberia, from which only about 5,000 to 6,000 survived to return to Germany after the war. This war was a psychological and military turning point of World War II. The image of the German army's invincibility was shattered forever. From then on, strategic control of the Eastern Front passed entirely into the hands of the Soviet Red Army, and they began their long, bloody march toward Berlin. The Battle of Stalingrad was not just a fight for a city. It was a brutal clash between two opposing ideologies and the wills of two dictators. It was a war where heroism, savagery, sacrifice, and betrayal walked hand in hand. This battle changed the concept of modern urban warfare forever. It is at once a symbol of the ultimate misery and crisis of human history, and on the other hand, an epic of unimaginable resistance and resilience. The fate of World War II was decided amidst the ruins of Stalingrad, reminding us that history's most critical moments are often determined by the blood, sweat, and tears of ordinary people.